Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Today, we're going to open a history book that has remained shut for far too long, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. When you think of the ancient Mediterranean, what comes to mind? Likely Greece with its philosophers and Rome with its legions. But what if I told you that's only a fraction of the story, the version told by the victors? Fascinating civilizations existed, powerful voices that traded, created art, and developed ideas that shaped our present. Cultures that were deliberately overshadowed, their stories lost or absorbed by the great powers. Today we're giving them their voice back. Before we dive in, I wanted to tell you something about the images you're seeing. To bring this narrative to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment to let your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Our journey begins with the seafaring people, the true kings of the sea. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense, but masters of trade and connection. We're talking about the Phoenicians. Their home was a narrow strip of land in what is now Lebanon, but their influence stretched across the entire Mediterranean. Imagine a world without an easy-to-learn alphabet. Earlier writing systems like hieroglyphs were incredibly complex, reserved only for scribes and elites. The Phoenicians, pragmatic and brilliant, needed a more efficient way to record their business transactions, and so they created something revolutionary. They developed a writing system with just 22 symbols, each representing a consonant sound. It was so simple and effective that anyone could learn it. This Phoenician alphabet is the direct ancestor of the Greek alphabet, Latin, and ultimately the one you're using to read this right now. Think about that for a moment. Every time you write, you're using a technology invented by this trading people. They democratized writing, taking it out of temples and palaces and putting it into the hands of ordinary people. It was one of history's greatest intellectual revolutions, and it's often overlooked. But the Phoenicians didn't just give us letters, they were master artisans. They produced a deep purple dye known as Tyrian purple. It was extracted from thousands of murex snails in a laborious and costly process, making it the ultimate symbol of royalty and power in the ancient world. Wearing purple was a statement of supreme status. Roman emperors and Egyptian pharaohs coveted this color. The Phoenicians controlled its production and trade, which gave them immense wealth and influence without needing vast armies. Their power was economic and cultural. They established colonies and trading posts throughout the Mediterranean, from Cyprus to the coasts of the Iberian Peninsula. The most famous of all was Carthage in modern-day Tunisia, a city that would become a superpower and the greatest rival to the burgeoning Roman Republic. The story of the rivalry between Rome and Carthage, the Punic Wars, is almost always told from the Roman perspective. The Carthaginians, heirs to the Phoenicians, are portrayed as the villains. But what was their side of the story? Most of their texts were destroyed by the Romans after the city's fall. What we know of them comes through their enemies or through archaeology. Recent excavations in Carthage and other Phoenician sites reveal a sophisticated culture with a rich religious life and a complex social structure. They were not the barbarians Roman propaganda described. Their legacy is silent but profound. They were the connectors of the ancient world, weaving a web of trade and ideas that united disparate civilizations. Without them, the cultural and technological development of Greece and Rome would undoubtedly have been much slower and profoundly different. Now let's travel to the other end of the Mediterranean, to a land of mystery and enigmatic art, the Iberian Peninsula, long before it was called Hispania. Here the Iberians flourished, a collection of peoples with a unique and fascinating cultural identity that resisted external influences. The Iberians were not a unified empire, but a confederation of tribes and city-states that shared language, religion, and art. Unlike the Phoenicians, their influence was more local, but their artistic legacy is one of the most striking and mysterious in ancient Europe. Their most iconic work is, without a doubt, the Lady of Elche. This limestone bust, believed to represent a goddess or an aristocrat, shows an astonishing level of detail and sophistication. Her jewelry, her complex headdress, her serene expression all speak of a culture with a deep sense of aesthetics. The Lady of Elche isn't just a pretty face, she's a window into a lost world. The hollow in her back suggests she might have been used as a funerary urn or to hold relics. Her gaze seems to hold secrets we haven't deciphered yet, a symbol of the depth of Iberian culture. And then there's their writing. The Iberians had their own writing system, known as the Iberian script. It's a semi-syllabic system, a curious mix of alphabet and syllabary. The problem is that although we can read the sounds because it's partly based on Phoenician, we don't understand most of the words. The Iberian language is a non-Indo-European language, meaning it's unrelated to Latin, Greek, or Celtic. It's an isolated language, an echo of prehistoric Europe. Deciphering it is one of the greatest challenges of modern linguistics. Every small inscription found is a crucial piece of the puzzle. They were formidable warriors, too. Their swords, the famous falcatas, had a curved design and a lethal edge, so prized that even Roman soldiers sometimes adopted them. They fought fiercely against the Carthaginians and then against the Romans, defending their independence for centuries. The Roman conquest of Iberia was a long and brutal process. It wasn't a simple annexation. It was a war of attrition that lasted almost 200 years. The resistance of cities like Numantia became legendary. They preferred death over surrender, a testament to their indomitable spirit. Over time, Iberian culture was absorbed by Rome. Their language was replaced by Latin, their gods assimilated, and their cities rebuilt in the Roman style. Their voice faded, buried beneath the layers of a new civilization that rewrote the history of the peninsula in its own image. But why are these stories so little known? The answer is simple and brutal. History, to a large extent, is a tool of power. Dominant civilizations like Greece, and especially Rome, didn't just conquer territories, they also conquered the narrative. Rome had an incredibly effective propaganda machine. Its historians, like Livy or Polybius, wrote the chronicles that would become the bedrock of Western history. In their accounts, Rome was always the protagonist, the bearer of civilization, and its enemies were obstacles or barbarians. It's not that they deliberately lied all the time, but they wrote from a deeply ethnocentric perspective, meaning they saw the world through Roman eyes, judging all other cultures by Roman standards. Their achievements were minimized, their complexities ignored. Furthermore, the survival of texts is a key factor. Roman and Greek literature was meticulously copied and preserved by monks and scholars during the Middle Ages because it was considered the foundation of Christian and Western culture. Phoenician or Iberian texts didn't have that luck. That's why to reconstruct these stories, we can't rely solely on books. We have to become detectives. Archaeology becomes our primary tool. Every pottery shard, every tomb, every building foundation is a word and a story that was silenced. It's slow, painstaking work. Piece by piece, archaeologists and linguists are recovering these lost voices. They're proving that the ancient Mediterranean was a far more diverse, interconnected, and polyphonic place than the traditional narrative has led us to believe. Let's also think about the Etruscans in pre-Roman Italy. An enigmatic civilization with vibrant art, and a society that, according to some Roman sources, granted women a much higher status than in Greece or Rome. Their language, like Iberian, remains largely a mystery. Or the Numidians in North Africa, legendary horsemen, and a powerful kingdom that played a key role in the wars between Rome and Carthage. Their history is often reduced to a footnote in the annals of Roman history, but they were a political and military force to be reckoned with. Each of these cultures had its own cosmology, its own myths, its own way of understanding the world. The Phoenicians, for example, worshipped gods like Baal and Astarte. Their rituals and beliefs were often misinterpreted and demonized by their rivals, creating dark legends that have endured for centuries. Modern archaeology, with tools like ancient DNA analysis and satellite geolocation, is dismantling many of these old prejudices. It's revealing trade networks and migrations we never even imagined. It's restoring complexity and humanity to these peoples. Recovering these voices isn't just an academic exercise. It's an act of historical justice. It's recognizing that our cultural heritage is far richer and more varied than we think. It's understanding that our civilization doesn't have a single origin, but is the result of a chorus of many different voices. The story of the Phoenicians teaches us that power doesn't always lie in military conquest, but in connection and exchange. In a globalized world like ours, their model of a trade and cultural network is more relevant than ever. They were the first globalizers. The story of the Iberians reminds us of the importance of cultural identity and resilience. Their art and their mysterious language are a testament that even when a culture is absorbed, its echoes can linger for millennia, waiting to be heard again. Here comes the crucial twist. The silencing of these cultures wasn't a mere historical accident. It was a strategy. By erasing or absorbing the identities of conquered peoples, Rome consolidated its power. Creating a unified Roman identity was essential to governing such a vast and diverse empire. Romanization wasn't just about building aqueducts and roads. It was a profound process of cultural assimilation. It involved imposing Latin, Roman law, and Roman religion. It was a way of saying, your history starts now with us. The previous past simply ceased to matter. This narrative victory was perhaps Rome's most enduring achievement. It survived the fall of the empire itself. The European Renaissance looked back not to the Iberians or Phoenicians, but to Greece and Rome as the cradle of civilization. A direct line was constructed that deliberately ignored all these other branches of the tree of history. So by studying these ignored voices, we're not just learning about the past. We're actively challenging a narrative of power that has shaped our perception of history and ourselves for 2,000 years. We're rebalancing the scales. The ancient world wasn't a duopoly of Greece and Rome. It was a vibrant ecosystem of cultures that interacted, competed, traded, and influenced each other in complex ways. It was a sea of stories, not a river with a single current. Next time you write a word, remember the Phoenician traders. Next time you see a piece of ancient art of inexplicable beauty, think of the Iberian artisans. Their legacies are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. The accounts of the Phoenicians and their trade network teach us a valuable lesson about soft power. Their influence didn't come from the sword, but from utility, innovation, and the ability to connect worlds. They offered something everyone wanted, whether it was the alphabet, glass, or purple dye. Their expansion through colonies was not like Rome's. They didn't send armies to subjugate, but families of merchants to establish new business centers. These were multicultural enclaves where locals and Phoenicians mixed, creating hybrid and dynamic societies like Carthage. On the other hand, Iberian society offers us a fascinating counterpoint. It was a culture rooted in its land. Its social structure was based on a warrior aristocracy and fortified hill towns known as oppida, which dominated the landscape and demonstrated their power and organization. Iberian religion is another of its great mysteries. They worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses linked to nature, war, and fertility. Sanctuaries, like Cerro de los Santos, were filled with hundreds of ex-votos, small stone figures offered by the faithful, which give us an intimate glimpse into their faith. Imagining their soundscape is a fascinating exercise. The metallic clang of a falcata being forged, the murmur of a language we cannot translate in a marketplace, the ritual chants in a mountaintop sanctuary, sounds lost to time that archaeology tries to evoke. The destruction of these cultures by Rome wasn't always violent. Often it was seductive. Rome offered stability, citizenship, access to an immense trade network, and opportunities for social advancement. For many local elites, becoming Roman was simply the smartest and most pragmatic option. This process creates a paradox. When excavating a Roman villa in Spain, we often find an Iberian settlement beneath it. And sometimes the villa's art mixes Roman styles with Iberian motifs. It's a silent testament to an identity that refused to completely vanish. The study of these forgotten cultures forces us to be humble. It shows us that history is a constant draft, rewritten with every new discovery. What we take for granted about the past today may be nuanced or even refuted tomorrow by a new inscription or an unexpected find. Let's consider the impact of the Phoenician alphabet. By simplifying writing, they allowed knowledge to be recorded and disseminated beyond a small caste of scribes. This laid the foundations for Greek philosophical thought and Roman law. Without accessible writing, those intellectual revolutions would have been unthinkable. The legend of the Minotaur in Crete, for example. Many historians believe it could be a distorted memory of the power of the Minoan civilization, another non-Greek culture that dominated the Aegean before the Mycenaeans. The Greeks turned the story into a monster that had to be slain by their hero. This pattern repeats. The others, those outside the central narrative, are often turned into monsters, barbarians, or exotic villains. It's a way to justify conquest and to reinforce one's own identity as civilized. It's one of the oldest tools of propaganda. That's why when we read a Roman historian talking about child sacrifices in Carthage, we must be critical. While some type of ritual may have existed, the archaeological evidence is ambiguous. Much of the description comes from their mortal enemies. It's history told by the victor. The recovery of these voices also has a political component today. Groups in Lebanon identify with their Phoenician heritage. In Spain and Portugal, the Iberian heritage is a source of regional pride and an identity distinct from the Castilian narrative centered on the Reconquista. The past is never dead. It's not even past, as William Faulkner famously said. The narratives we build about it hold immense power in the present. They define who we are, where we come from, and where we believe we belong. By exploring the Iberians and Phoenicians, we're not diminishing the greatness of Greece or Rome. We're adding missing chapters to the book of human history. We're making the picture larger, more complete, and honestly, much more interesting. The Lady of Elche has gazed at us for over 2,500 years. Her expression is neither Roman nor Greek. It is something unique, her own. She challenges us to look beyond the familiar, to listen to the silence between the lines of history books, and to ask ourselves, what other voices are we still ignoring? Consider Iberian metallurgy. They weren't just experts in weaponry. They created jewelry and bronze objects of exquisite beauty. The treasure of Javia, for example, displays goldsmithing that rivals any Mediterranean culture. They were a people of artists, not just warriors. Meanwhile, the Phoenicians were masters of glass. They are credited, if not with its invention, then with the popularization of glass-blowing techniques, creating vibrantly colored vessels and beads that were traded throughout the known world and highly coveted. These material innovations, the alphabet, glass, metallurgical techniques, dyes, are tangible proof of their genius. These contributions became so deeply integrated into other cultures that their origins blurred, later claimed by those who wrote history. The tragedy of the Iberians is that their assimilation was so complete that their language became extinct without leaving daughter languages. Unlike Latin, which evolved into the Romance languages, Iberian disappeared. Every word we manage to decipher is like resurrecting a ghost. This process of discovery continues every day. Right now, somewhere in the Mediterranean, a team of archaeologists could be unearthing the key to understanding a new facet of these cultures, a piece that forces us to rewrite a paragraph in our textbooks. History is not static. It's not a collection of dead facts. It's a living conversation between the present and the past. And in this conversation, it is our duty to ensure that all voices have a chance to be heard, especially those that were silenced by force. The Phoenicians teach us about resilience through trade. Their homeland was conquered by Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, and Greeks, but their trade network and culture survived through their colonies, especially Carthage, which became an empire in its own right. For their part, Iberian sculpture tells us about their social structure. Great ladies like the Lady of Elche or the Lady of Baza probably represented elite women with an important social and religious role. They were not anonymous figures, but portraits of power. They also sculpted warrior figures, like the warrior of Moisant, which give us a clear idea of their weaponry and their martial ethos. They were a people prepared to defend their land, a necessity in the tumultuous Iron Age Mediterranean. Understanding this helps us deconstruct the myth of the Greek miracle. The Greeks didn't create civilization out of thin air. They were in constant dialogue with Egypt and the Near East, a dialogue largely facilitated by Phoenician ships and merchants who brought not only goods, but ideas. In the same way, the Pax Romana wasn't a peace imposed in a vacuum. It was the end of a long period of power struggles among multiple actors: Carthaginians, Hellenistic kingdoms, Gallic, and Iberian tribes. Rome didn't bring order to chaos, but rather imposed itself as the hegemonic order. The Mediterranean Sea, which the Romans called Mare Nostrum, our sea, was never really just theirs. It was always a shared space, a melting pot of cultures. The name itself is an act of narrative appropriation, of erasing others from the picture. Research into ancient shipwrecks gives us a time capsule of this interconnected world. A sunken Phoenician ship might contain tin from Britannia, copper from Cyprus, pottery from Greece, and ivory from Africa. It was a global network in miniature. Even in death, these cultures speak to us. The Iberian necropolises, with their complex cremation rituals and grave goods, reveal their beliefs about the afterlife and their social structure. Warrior tombs contain their weapons, women's tombs, their jewelry and weaving tools. The Topets of Carthage, cemeteries with urns containing incinerated remains of children, form the basis of the dark legend of sacrifices. But many archaeologists today believe they were sanctuaries for prematurely deceased children, a sacred place for mourning, not for ritual murder. The truth is, history is messy, full of nuances and contradictions. Simple narratives of good versus evil or civilization versus barbarism are rarely true. Reality is always more complex and much more human. In the end, the ancient Mediterranean was like a noisy, passionate conversation between many people. The history we usually hear is as if someone had recorded only the two loudest voices and erased the rest. Our job is to try and recover the whispers and echoes of the others. And here lies the most powerful conclusion. By rescuing these stories, we not only change the past, but we enrich our present. We realize that cultural diversity is not a modern invention, but the natural condition of human history from its beginnings. It teaches us that there are many ways to be powerful, many ways to be civilized, that the legacy of a people is not measured solely in empires and conquests, but in poems and songs, in an alphabet, in a unique way of seeing the world. And those legacies are indestructible. History is not a straight line that leads from Athens to Rome and then to us. It's a tree with countless branches, many of which were pruned by the gardeners of power, but the roots are still there, deep and intertwined, waiting for us to rediscover them. So next time you visit a museum or read a history book, keep your eyes open for the untold stories, for the artifacts without a clear label, for the peoples who appear only as a footnote. That's where the most fascinating secrets are often found, because every voice recovered from the silence of the past helps us better understand the full chorus of humanity, a symphony of which we are all, in one way or another, heirs. History belongs to everyone, and it's time to reclaim all its parts. Next time you look at a map of the Mediterranean, don't just see today's borders or Rome's provinces. Try to see the ancient Phoenician trade routes like arteries of a beating heart, carrying goods, ideas, and people from one shore to another. Try to imagine the hills of the Iberian Peninsula, not empty, but crowned by the proud cities of the Iberians, with their walls, their artisans, and their warriors watching over a world that was theirs, with a language and customs that belonged to them. The narrative of a purely Greco-Roman Mediterranean is a simplification, a brand story. The reality was a mix, a melting pot of influences. The Romans took gods from the Greeks, building techniques from the Etruscans, and naval tactics from the Carthaginians. Acknowledging this doesn't diminish Rome's achievements. It contextualizes them. It makes them more real and less mythical. It shows that no culture, however powerful, is an island. All are products of their time and their interactions with their neighbors. The past, therefore, is a polyglot place. It speaks Latin and Greek, yes, but also Phoenician, Iberian, Etruscan, Punic. Listening to all those languages is the true goal of history. It's going from a melody to a symphony. I hope this journey has opened a new window into the ancient world for you, one that invites you to question, to explore, and to seek out the voices hidden in the shadows of the grand narratives. History is far grander than what we were told. In summary, the ancient sea was full of voices, and we've only just begun to listen to all of them. From the sailors who gave us letters to the artists whose language remains an enigma, all of them are fundamental parts of our shared history. To ignore them is to ignore a part of ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through untold history. It's a privilege to share these ideas with such a curious and passionate community. Your attention is the greatest gift. This is just the beginning. There are so many more stories waiting to be told. If you enjoyed this journey and want to discover more secrets of the past, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. What other forgotten civilization fascinates you? Did you know the history of the Phoenicians or Iberians? Leave your opinions and theories in the comments below. I love reading your thoughts. Until next time, curious minds.